Welcome to Men Making a Difference, PGSAO men who inspire and motivate.
Grigg, how are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you very much, State's Attorney.
You know, it's so great to see you, even though we're seeing each other virtually in this crazy pandemic new world. Can you talk a little bit about yourself, your role in the office, and also how the pandemic has impacted you?
Yes, I've been in the office for approximately 8 years. I came here after being in private practice for many years, and I had before that been an assistant state's attorney in Montgomery County. I love it here. I'm in the economic crimes unit. It's part of the special prosecutions unit run, as you know, by Franklin Shelton. And we've got a great bunch of people here. I've got a lot of help from those guys, Franklin and Jennifer. I enjoy so much doing these cases that help out the elderly, help out people that have been taken advantage of. I know you know a lot about Geraldine Jackson, how she was taken advantage of by Paula Medley. We tried that case for about 5 days and got a conviction. And Paula,
you know what? Before you talk more about kind of like what happened in terms of the sentencing, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about that case, some of the facts of that case, because it's a really important case in that, Miss Jackson is not unique in being taken advantage of in this way. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Miss Jackson's in her 80s, and she was taken advantage by a caregiver over a period of 1.5 to 2 years. She trusted this caregiver implicitly, so much so that she agreed to let her take care of her bank accounts and everything. But after about 1.5 years, she discovered that her bank accounts have been so depleted, and they shouldn't have been depleted, that she began to suspect something was wrong. So she got her Ruth Person, who's not related to her, but is a good friend of hers and has been a good friend of hers. And Miss Person helped her go to the bank and find out that the accounts have been drained, and they traced it back to Geraldine Jackson. We built a case on this. As I said earlier, went to trial for about 5 days and convicted her. But you're right, this is not unique. I have at least 3 other similar cases, not with caregivers, but actually family members that have taken advantage of some elderly women. I've got one that's going to be indicted soon, and the victim there is in her 80s and may have lost as much as $600,000.
Wow.
And so we just can't wait for the grand jury to be up next week and get that indicted and get going with that case in particular. We have another woman whose grandson has taken advantage of her, and she is starting to go into Alzheimer's, and she's a delightful woman. And her daughter figured this out because the money again was gone, and realized that the checks were being written out to the grandson, and the grandson was living a lifestyle where his house was being paid for by the grandmother, but now she doesn't have funds to pay for her food. So it's a very tragic kind of case. That one will be indicted soon, and that was over $25,000. So it's not just caregivers, but it's family members, and we have, unfortunately, more of those cases than we should, but we go after them. That is part of what keeps me going and keeps me coming into work, because I can help these folks and make it better for them.
Drew, when you talk about these economic crimes, oftentimes they are not the crimes that we see on the news. They don't get all of the attention, but individuals are more likely to be taken advantage of by someone economically than even physically. So the economic crimes that we take on in this office really are extremely important, because those individuals who are targeting people, once we get them, they're not able to commit the same offense against someone else. So can you just talk about how we can do maybe even a better job of talking about the work that you're doing and letting the community know that there's help for them, because sometimes people are too embarrassed to admit, quite frankly, that they're a victim of an economic crime.
Well, one of the things, and I know that you and Franklin did a town hall kind of thing on this a few weeks or months ago. When we didn't have pandemic, we were probably going out every 2 to 3 months into the community. We wish to start that back up. And now as we've gotten our shots and others get their shots, I think we can get back in the community. And that is so helpful, because we go to community centers and we tell folks about the do's and don'ts Don't answer that phone if you don't recognize the phone number. You know, don't return that computer solicitation. They may be spearfishing and trying to get your information. If the bank calls you, hang up and call your bank from the number you have, not the number they gave you. You know, there's a lot of things we can do along those lines. There's post office where they come into the postal boxes and fish for people's checks in there, and literally will use a glue on a bottle and stick it down there and pull the checks out if they haven't gotten an arrow key, which allows them in. So we caution people to be careful about where they send their checks out from. So things that we can tell folks that help them prevent this, but then they will know where to come if this becomes a problem.
Wow, and tell me, like, this is a specialty, right, in the law, that the economic crime, financial crimes. Where do you, like, how do you all stay on top of the new scams, the new ways of people taking advantage of others? Because as technology increases, so do, you know, opportunities for, you know, people to engage in bad behavior. And how do we stay on top of that?
Partially sometimes from the calls, when the police get them, they come to me and say, here's a new thing, and we start to brainstorm through it to investigate it. Sometimes we get it just like anyone else from looking at the news, believe it or not. Sometimes people will call in to the office and say, look, I'm not sure this is right. Would the IRS be calling me? So some of the sorts of things. Then we have the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and I periodically go on that about once or twice a month and go to their tutorials, and sometimes they come up with new scams that are fairly sophisticated, and some of them lead to Nigeria and places like that and other places in the world. So we get it from all over.
Do you ever coordinate with the U.S. Attorney's Office or the Department of Justice on some of your cases?
We do, with Greenbelt and the United States Attorney's Office out of Baltimore. In fact, Franklin and I are periodically on a working group for, there's some certain crimes that come out of the casinos that we have. So that's a working group. We were on that last month. I think there's one coming up next month and the month after that. So we have a core group of people that are FBI agents, Secret Service agents, federal prosecutors, state prosecutors, and state police forces. So we all get on those calls and share information together and are able to call up one another when we need to trade information.
What are some of the things that individuals can do? Because we know that oftentimes these scammers, they know more about you, right? Obviously, they know who you are because they know who they're targeting than you would normally think. You know, an average person who doesn't know you would know. So, like, there's information that they may have about you, so that they know the right things to say, and you know, what might motivate you to trust them. So can you tell people, like, what are some ways to protect yourself? Like, what are just some easy tips to, like, avoid as best you can from being a victim?
Be careful.
Especially, and if I can add in there, especially individuals who are relying on others for care, because the elderly oftentimes need care. Individuals who have, you know, maybe health conditions have a caregiver. And so there's a certain level of trust that they have to have in order to get the service they need. But, like, what are some things that, even, you know, when you have individuals who might be in your home close to your things, what are some things you can do to protect yourself?
Well, to tell the story again about Geraldine Jackson, what she learned from that caregiver who stole from her, Paula Medley, was to always husband and keep her bank statements and everything to herself. Never give that access to anyone else. She had been leaving her checkbook in her pocketbook on the back of the wheelchair, and she would be in her bed, but the wheelchair would be back in the kitchen, and giving Paula Medley access to that. I would also say, if people use, you know, something like Facebook or anything, be careful what you post out there, because people can get access to that. Be careful and check periodically, if you can, with TransUnion, Experian, or Equifax as to what your credit posture is, and sometimes consider possibly getting a credit lock. If you don't need a mortgage, you don't need an auto loan, or you don't open any credit card accounts, you might want to lock access to that where only you can reopen it, so somebody can't pose as you. Be careful, as I said earlier, about who's calling you and identifying themselves and what they're asking you about. I think of the scams where somebody calls it, makes it sound like it's the grandchild and that the grandchild is in trouble. Please quickly send money, get it in green cards and send off the green cards, or send cash overnight. Get off the phone after getting information and check with those family members and find out if indeed that child is in trouble at all. Check with your son or your daughter. Try to find the grandchild. Try to locate that. Don't trust that somebody that you can't see and you can just hear is there trying to help you. They may be helping themselves to your money.
Absolutely. Now, sometimes individuals, let's say they are, they have maybe cognitive disabilities, or they can't remember. And let's say a family member or caregiver says, oh, well, this person told me that I could have access to this money, or that I'm allowed to use their credit card, or what have you. How difficult is it to try some of these cases, and how do you, because we have been very successful, how do we get these convictions when, when people are taking advantage of others? And sometimes it is, the facts are not as clear as we would like.
Well, for example, in the Geraldine Jackson case, she was very much with us mentally and physically, so it was easier in that case. But we've had cases, you're right, with people who are starting to slip away in Alzheimer's. And sometimes we can call doctors who have give us a baseline as an expert and say, this person started to slip into Alzheimer's on this date. We can then track whether a power of attorney was written and signed supposedly by this person after they started to slip into Alzheimer's. That would be evidence to show that this person may have signed for them, or under a pretense got them to sign it without them understanding what they were signing. There are sometimes guardians who are appointed for people to handle their finances. Most of the time, those guardians, in 90% of the cases, they're good guardians who do not steal anything from them, but occasionally they sometimes go wrong. So we've had those cases. We get referrals sometimes from the orphans court, which handles people's estates. So we find out after the fact that one of the family members or caregiver has been dipping into the money before, or even after the estate is there, or even posing as a personal representative and saying that they're entitled to all the money, and then a fake will comes out of it. I tried one of those cases. So there are many ways that this can happen, and people need to guard their financial information, their wills and everything. Check out if you're hiring somebody that's a caregiver that you're going to start to trust. Try to hire that person through a reputable company that can show you that they've tried to do a criminal check. There's a quick way to do it in Maryland. You can do Maryland case search. And if you're at all adept in computers or get somebody to help you, you can look up this person and see if they have any charges or convictions. So there's a quick way to check, at least within Maryland. You can do it in DC and Virginia, I believe. So in the DMV area, we can check these sorts of things out. And that would be helpful to them as to who they hire.
Well, I know that our community is well served by the work that you do, the commitment you have to our office, really the commitment you have to the community, because I've seen you interact with our residents and they trust you, which is great. Because, when people are taken advantage of, they want to know that someone is going to fight for them. And you've proven that you are an able fighter. And so we do appreciate all of the work that you've done here. Do you have any advice, just as closing thoughts, do you have any advice for either aspiring law students or individuals who have a career in the law that may be considering financial crimes as an area of to specialize in? Are there any things that you would recommend they do now in order to prepare themselves to get into this area of law?
I would tell them to pay particular attention to in their criminal law classes, and then to also understand finance. And that's something that I understood later in my life as I became, someone who bought a house, who had his own bank account. And most people get their bank accounts when they're in college, that sort of thing. But I pay particular attention to those sort of things and understand how banks work and how records are kept, and understand as you pay your taxes how that process works, and understand how people can be scammed on getting refund checks and things like that sent to people that shouldn't deserve them. I would just be very much aware of what your financial world is. And as you understand that, it starts to unspool, and we learn more and more about that. Those are sorts of things that you'll need to know as you get into this. And then just be prepared to read a lot of documents, but don't forget the fact that these are human beings whose lives are being ruined by these people who steal the money. And I've seen people lose houses. Miss Duckett, for one, in the William Whalen case, which incidentally will probably be trying this May. And it hasn't set a date yet. We have a date for a jury trial in January, but they want to go earlier and waive their right to a jury. So I've just today learned that, and we're going to get that case ready to go May or June of this year. And a woman lost her house because she trusted this man to manage her mortgage payments. He didn't make them. He pocketed the money, and they foreclosed on her house. It's such a sad, sad case, but we will be trying that one shortly.
Well, Drew, we'll certainly be watching that case. I know that that is a case that got a lot of attention, but there's so many others that have not gotten the attention from, let's say, the media, but certainly have gotten the attention from you and folks in our office. So good luck with that case. I know that you and I'll be discussing it probably very shortly to talk about strategy, but I'm really, again, thrilled to have you in the office, and thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.